I want to talk about boundaries. Boundaries. In the boundless universe, what is a boundary? There's so much coming up right now with the feminine energies. And boundaries feeling crossed, broken, disrespected. And when I was with the bamboo plants today, I was having some wisdom come through that I'm feeling guided to share. And it's really about this inner knowing and this truth that it's not up to anybody else to hold our boundaries. And this has been such a deep exploration for me in my life, because especially in intimate or sexual situations, I will express my boundaries hoping that the person is going to hold them with me or hold them for me, and been disappointed so many times by that expectation. And whatever it is, going into shame, blame, victim consciousness. And there's so many layers of it still coming through in the relational sphere, microcosms and macrocosms of boundaries. And when we put the responsibility outside of ourselves for someone else to hold our boundaries, we're disempowering ourselves. We're diverting that internal union and that sovereignty of being grounded in our center, knowing what we want and what we need to feel safe in our own bodies and our own experiences, especially when our hearts are open and we enter vulnerable spaces with another person. And when I have expected someone else to hold my boundaries and put that responsibility on them, it has set off and ruined and sometimes burned bridges. So many wildfires can happen whenever I say one thing and then I do something else. And my integrity is up to me, But then if I have this experience that I feel that my integrity or my respect or my honor was crossed by the person that I've chosen to be close to, it's so easy to project that onto the external reality or to a different person, instead of taking a really deep look within and saying, wow, I didn't hold my boundary. I'm not going to give myself a hard time. I'm not going to use that as an excuse to bully myself or feel like I've failed or rehash stories about my adequacy or competence to do that. And it's an evolutionary experience of that. And for me, that even took me a long time to accept when I didn't follow or hold my own boundaries, and really coming to terms with, is that boundary even coming from a place of my truth? Or is it something that I set to try to control the situation, knowing that I wouldn't follow it, so that I can then punish myself with it later? And I think there's so many shadows and wounds that are in the sexual sphere, in our first couple of chakras, really. The base, our base, our root, our survival, what we do to exist and live. Are we in our passion and our purpose, or are we just getting by? And then that second chakra is just sharing energy with other and engaging and blending energies. Can that be a clear experience where we're holding ourself and they're holding their self, and we come together and we meet? Just backlight. We meet like this. We come together. We don't merge and blend, and then when something happens, it's just, we have to be we can't even see each other anymore. We're off this screen because something happened where we had this idea of expectation of what relationship is or what relationship is supposed to be. But if each person is staying in their sovereignty, not codependent, leaning in like a contact dance, leaning in, finding a middle meeting point. I call it the golden thread of any connection. There's a golden thread of every connection. It's when it feels really fucking good and you know that you're in alignment. And there's every other seesaw, teeter-totter around that golden thread moment. It's like striking the chord, and you can hear when it's off key. And sometimes we can tune it back by ear, and sometimes like, oh, hang on, I actually need a tool for this. I need to sit down and tune this. I need to pause. And that's how I see relationships. There's so much evolutionary learning in intimacy, relating, and especially sexually sharing, that if we don't have the proper boundaries in place, we can't have that structure that's going to create a sustainable foundation for intimacy that has trust intact with self and with other. If we can't hold ourselves, we can't hold anybody else, and we can't expect others to hold us. And no matter what I go through in intimate relationships, my gene keys tell me that my purpose in life is intimacy. But no matter what, it's never really about the other. We are reflecting each other. We are mirrors for our soul's evolution and our growth. There are no accidents or coincidences. We come into close contact with people that, we have these puzzle pieces to our soul's growth that we've come here to do, and we get close to people that we have these pieces with, and we can either collapse into a trauma, a wound, a story, a false identity of the ego and create more separation, or we can really meet that intimacy from a place of, okay, I'm ready to look at myself, I'm ready to take responsibility and accountability for what's going on, and meet every situation with willingness and an open heart. That's my ideal reality, and yet there's all of these other spectrums of boundaries, and there's so much energy coming up right now with feminine consent. So that's why I wanted to speak to this, because as long as women are expecting men to hold them in some sort of way that they're not claiming and holding on their own accord, in their own feminine essence, put a plate of food in front of a hungry animal and tell it not to eat. That's what it comes down to, is like very basic animalistic primal desires and tendencies and hormones. It doesn't matter if we're a man or a woman. I get into those spaces where it's just body and sensation and what's a boundary, and I don't know. And there's been so many times in my past where I've lost my own boundary and then come out of what seems like a hypnosis and then thought, wait, what happened to my boundary? You didn't hold my boundary. You challenged and tested my boundary, so you're not safe. But really, who's not holding self? So I've spoken to this before, and I feel that it can't be spoken to enough, and I'm sure there are other pieces to it that will come through, because it's such a deep experience to be a person in one's sovereignty, able to speak one's desires, boundaries, and needs, taking responsibility for what is being co-created, and showing up for it. So I know that it's not always easy to have these conversations, and it's, at least for me, in the past, it's been easier just to not talk about it and go with the flow of what's happening and then seeing where that leads. But that's not really taking command and inspired action towards what we want to create. And then it makes it this more windy, roundabout path, instead of just going directly to, this is what I want, this is who I am, this is how I want to connect, what I'm available for and not. And instead, there's so many ways that we can come into that alignment, into that balance, and strengthen that capacity and maintain that foundation, whatever structure relating we prefer, with anything. It doesn't even need to be intimate or sexual, but relating in all capacity, being in one's power, having power, being empowered in intimacy. That feels like such a deep taproot, and it really comes back to being in one's power, standing strong, before leaning into anything or anyone else, knowing who we are, what we want. Yep, that's what it's all about.